Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tea Time with Jesse. I am here today with my very good friend, Thomas Talhelm.
Hi, everybody.
Associate professor of, and we just talked about this.
Behavioral science.
Behavioral science. It's hard to know because his research goes a bunch of different topics and stuff. And we met when we were both Fulbright scholars in China in 2012. All the way back then when we were both very young.
A bit younger, yeah.
And he's also a tea guy. He's a researcher and an entrepreneur as well, making air filters and helping out people all throughout the developing world and now increasingly the developed world.
Yeah, in the US too.
In the US as well. So we have a lot to talk about and I'm very excited, but if you want to give everybody a brief introduction to yourself and who you are. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Thomas Talhelm. I am an associate professor of behavioral science. I'm at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, but don't let that fool you into thinking that I know anything about business, despite also having a company.
Yeah.
Behavioral science is a fancy way of saying mostly psychology, but I study culture, so I consider myself a cultural psychologist.
Nice.
I've lived in China for 7 years, speak Chinese. Got into tea while I was in China, so we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Researched cultural psychology and started an air purifier social enterprise.
Nice.
So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Very cool. And Thomas was one of the people when I wanted to go and like hang out at the tea market or whatever, just one of the people who like got it. You go there the whole day. You're going to be there for a while. In fact, some of the early green teas that I got from myself, they're not on the website, but like my own green tea, like collection really started with your green tea lady in Ma Liandao, who is like half a minute walk away from my pu'er guy, who actually does have teas on the website. So we're going to drink this baozhong tea from Taiwan. This is a tea that I got while I was in Pinglin, which is a city. It's amazing. It's only half an hour from Taipei, but it's like because they drill a tunnel through like a mountain, they get into like a mountain climate. So even though it's really close to Taipei, it's like it's like, you know, they have tea farms there.
That's cool.
And it's a really cool thing. So I got this tea, and I think that you will enjoy it. This is they call qingxiangxing, so like the sort of like fragrant and fresh. And then for the second half, we'll try something darker, and just be able to get a little bit of this thing. How did you get into tea? Like, because you also were like me, right? You didn't drink tea back in the States.
Never. My parents didn't drink tea, and then I remember in college trying it once or twice, and I think my first tea that I ever had was probably like a Lipton blueberry or something like that, and I was like, how do people like this? This is terrible. So I really didn't like tea, but I didn't have much experience with it. And then I went to China. And one of the things you do when you go to China for the first time is you go to like a tea house or something and people serve you. And I'm the type of person that, you know, if it's in front of me, I'm going to drink it or eat it. Yeah. Like I hate wasting food.
No self-control.
Yeah, no self-control. Also,
you were putting it like, I hate wasting food. I'm like, no self-control.
That's also true.
Yeah, maybe both true.
Yeah. And so I remember going to a tea house and I didn't understand the rule at the time, which is, or the implicit rule, which is that like if you finish your cup, they're gonna pour you more, you know? And so I just finished cup after cup after cup, and I didn't drink coffee either. So no tea, no coffee, I didn't drink Coke.
Tea blasted, like tea drunk.
So buzzed. I remember walking out of that place and just like, okay, where are we going next? Like,
so that's the cha zui, the tea drunkenness. And it can happen actually, especially if you're caffeine sensitive. It's good to maybe moderate the income or pour out the first steep as a wash. Although for these lighter, this is an oolong that's so light, it's kind of like a green tea.
That's right.
And so they drink this first steep for sure. So we're gonna give a tiny bit here to our tea pets just because everybody on the internet yells at me if I don't. And we'll pour for you here.
Great.
So it's good to be able to have my old China friends back over for tea. The world has led us to many different places, and now you're in LA.
Yeah.
Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
I took a smell a bit earlier, and it's so fragrant.
Yeah, the fragrance is really, really nice.
That's one of the things with the oolongs. It's like it's a bouquet. It's not sickeningly. It's not too flowery or anything, but
you smell here.
It's great.
Very nice.
Actually, oolong was the first. Thinking back to what really got me into tea, this was it.
Yeah, oolong, like light oolongs.
When I first, was at the tea houses and like slowly getting used to it, this was the thing where I was like, oh, I can get into that.
Yeah.
So
and oolong has this like, it's got this light, fresh, clean flavor, but also it's got the huigan, the aftertaste. That's like the thing that really separates the good teas from the bad teas. I find is like a lot of them will taste good going down, but if you have a really good quality tea, you kind of get this sweet aftertaste. It kind of just like comes back. It comes back. It's the thing to drink.
I feel like there's a thing about tea and also wine and beer and probably lots of things where I feel like there's a common entry point, like a type of it that most newbies are gonna like. And then there's the stuff that once you've had a lot more, you start to like. So with beer, it's, lagers are the easy ones, right? Everybody can handle a lager. And then it might be like a wheat beer. It's kind of banana-y, fruity, it's pretty easy. And after you drink beer for a few years, then it's like, oh, give me the IPA.
IPA,
right?
yeah. That's kind of like the raw
bitter.
pu'er. That's like, it's got that bitterness, but it's like, it's that balance. I think it brings out a lot of other flavors. But there is something just really nice and refreshing about drinking this.
Yeah.
Because it's like one of those classic, like, I like the mentality that they take towards tea, and which is like, find the best leaf you can, make it simply. And if you have good tea, you really don't have to do a whole lot else.
That's it.
That's basically it. And so this is why a lot of people ask me like, oh, can you have like honey or sugar in the tea? And it's like, there's no, like, if you're going to go and find the good tea, there's not really a point in doing that because it kind of does it by itself. It has that flavor in it.
Yeah.
So cheers. So very cool. So we both met originally on the Fulbright Fellowship.
That's right.
Fulbright, for people who don't know, it's like a State Department program where American scholars go to different countries to study, and then those countries send scholars to America. It's like academic exchange. And so I researched Chinese comedy and xiangsheng. And what was your research on?
Yeah, so I researched cultural psychology at the time. I was a PhD student at the University of Virginia. And my big idea that I was working on at the time was cultural differences within China. Yeah, I was a researcher in cultural psychology. People talk about East-West differences all the time. China and Japan are like this, and US and Germany, France are like that. But I had lived enough in China by that point to go like, wait a second, there's a lot of differences within China. And I'm not even talking about the far-flung, Tibet is very different. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about even just East Coast.
Within Han Chinese, because that was the thing. It's like in the comedy clubs, this is very obvious. Because in the comedy clubs, like half of a Chinese comedy show is like people making fun of other provinces and how they act.
That's right.
Or like Northerners being like, 北方人都这样子, 南方人都这样子, and like, this province, these people, urban, rural, all of these things that you don't even need to get into different ethnicities within China. There's a lot of...
there's so much richness there.
So much richness. And so this was, I guess, like, you felt like a good area for research. You're like, oh, it's very different. Why aren't people talking about it?
Yeah. It was completely empty in cultural psychology. There was not a cultural psychology of differences within China.
That's fascinating.
And the other thing that really drew me into it is I lived in Guangzhou for a year. I taught high school. Then I moved to Beijing. And especially at that time, Guangzhou was noticeably wealthier than Beijing. This is like 2006, 2007, that time. Like subways more developed, GDP's higher, more office buildings, stuff like that. Beijing felt a little bit more like, almost like an urban village, And yet it was Beijing that felt more Western in a lot of ways. By Western, I don't mean like eating McDonald's or whatever. I mean like talking to strangers, telling people what's on your mind.
Just like culturally, the rules of the game.
The social rules of what's going on. A little bit more Western, So like I remember sitting if I would eat alone at a restaurant in Beijing, maybe a third of the time somebody would be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, are you going home for Chinese New Year? How much does the flight cost? And all that. And then it'd be a conversation. Exactly.
Where are you from? Yeah.
And in Guangzhou, that never happened. Really never happened. There was curiosity. Like people would, look at me and, but people wouldn't start the conversation. And so the thing that really hooked me with that was to say, wait a second, I think a lot of us associate sort of Western ways of being with modernization and wealth. And it's so easy to say as China modernizes, it's becoming more Western or becoming more individualistic. But these two cities seemed like the contradiction of that. Guangzhou was wealthier, it had those connections to Hong Kong and the outside world.
Yeah.
and yet it felt more sort of Chinese, if I can say that, in the sense of like shy around strangers.
Yeah.
And
And for those of you who don't know, Guangzhou all the way in the south, Beijing basically all the way in the north.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of land between them. But at the other hand, like, China as a political entity has been unified, in some sort of way for 2,000 years. Actually, I don't know if they got that far down. The Qin dynasty probably didn't get all the way down to Guangzhou. But
Guangzhou,
that's
that
pretty far
area.
south.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't expect that sort of difference. And so that kind of got you interested in studying the differences within Chinese culture. And then what did that lead to?
Yeah, so first I just had this idea like, okay, there's differences between North and South broadly. One of the questions I had after that is like, okay, where? Like, okay, Beijing, I got that. Guangzhou, I got that. Shanghai, I'd spent some time there. That's southern, feels sort of southern. And I was a freelance journalist for a year. And I took classes at the Beijing Language and Culture University.
Yep, BLCU. Also, I spent 2 months there.
Yeah.
I'm sort of an alumni.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm mildly an alum.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very mild.
Yeah.
Very mild. But yeah, so you were at BLCU.
And I found they gave me classes there, and I thought all the classes were really boring. So then I just started sitting in on other classes at the university, and I found one on dialects in China. Fangyan.
Yeah.
And you weren't like learning how to speak the dialects, but you were learning about them. Where do they come from? Why are they different? What are the differences between them? And I was like, wow, this is really cool because people don't study that in China very much. Dialects are something that you forget, that you get rid of right now. At this moment in history, you want to get rid of those, right? I mean, you've probably talked to people in China whose parents speak a dialect, but then they never spoke the dialect to the kid.
If you go to the tea fields, if you go to the real rural areas where the tea is, a lot of times our generation is who you're talking to, and if you try to talk to somebody even one generation above, you're really pulling teeth. Like they struggle to speak what they would call standard Mandarin. So like when you go to those places, they don't say, "Wow, your Chinese is so good." They say, "Wow, 你说得好标准."
Yeah.
They say like, "Wow, you speak very standard."
You're so standard.
To them, they're not linguists. They're just like, you speak like the television and we don't. And they don't necessarily analyze it past that, which is also fascinating to me because it's like some of these dialects are so completely different that you could totally just call them other languages. Like if you didn't tell people this was a dialect versus a language, you would. I speak Mandarin very well, and there are lots of dialects that I just have no hope at all in hearing anything out of.
Yeah.
So you studied this class on dialects, and then what did you get out of it?
So we're in this class on dialects, and at one point our teacher is telling us about some minor difference in Chinese. It's the character shou, means hand. If you look in the dictionary, it means hand. But our teacher said, in some parts of China, it can refer to the whole arm. So like if you got hit with a ball here, you might say, "Oh, my shou was injured." Yeah, exactly. It was shou shang la.
Yeah.
And so he was showing us a map of like people went around China. Where is it only hand, and where is it also sometimes arm? And he showed us this map of China with like, I don't know if it's like red dots and blue dots or something like that. And the difference split almost perfectly on the Yangtze River.
Really?
So it was like north of the Yangtze River, only hand. South of the Yangtze River also could mean arm.
Yeah.
And I think the other students in the class, there's probably like 15 kids, master's students. They were probably like, yeah, whatever, okay, next.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, my mind is on fire. Like my mind's spinning because I've been thinking about these cultural differences for so many years, maybe 3-4 years at that point. And the brain is hard to measure, culture is hard to measure, but where people are speaking the same,
you kind of now you have an in.
That's an in, right? It'd be weird if culture was this way and language was that way, right?
Yeah.
Like they should fall on the same lines or close, right? And so I was like, well, whatever that line is, that must be the key. These differences that I've been living, and a lot of people have been living in China, it probably falls along the lines of whatever that is. And so I'm sitting there in that class, and I really had the sense that at that moment, like my life had changed. I knew that I had to figure out what that line represented historically. And so at first I was like, oh, is it like a border? I mean, in a coarse way, like, why is India so different from China? It's like, well, there's mountains in the way, right? And so that's why the cultures are so different. But really, the Yangtze River is, for Americans, it's kind of like the Mississippi. Yeah, it's not that.
You can get over it. It's not the Himalayas.
Yeah, it's not the Himalayas. It's not a hard river to get over.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so it wasn't, dividing, it wasn't keeping people out.
Yeah.
And so it must have been something different. And so I had that idea on my head, and I learned in the months after that, that's pretty much the rice-wheat dividing line in China. So Yangtze River in south is rice, north is wheat and other crops like millet and later corn and soybeans, stuff like that. And so that was really the moment where I was like, oh, okay, that's probably where these cultural differences are coming from. Because I want to document not just that there are differences. I mean, that's what psychologists do.
Yeah.
We can, test people and show that
It's
these
more
are not
interesting if you have a theory for why the differences exist in the first place.
that was sort of my whole thing.
Yeah,
I felt like cultural psychology had done a lot of documenting differences. I wanted to get a little bit deeper and go, okay, where do these differences come from? And to me, the thing that people have been doing for thousands of years, that's a good place to start. Like, where would culture come from? Oh, well, 90% of people were doing this.
Yeah.
You were farming rice or you're farming wheat. Almost everybody in a village would be doing this thousands of years. Seems like a good place to start, right? Would it be should we go look in ancient books and stuff like that? Books that most people weren't reading? Like, I don't know. Should we go to temples? Like,
well, I love this way of thinking, because this is like, as a comedian, I think a lot of times people will downplay the sort of popular art. They'll say like, well, let's look at the literati and not what was in the comedy club. But I was like, the comedy club people every day are trying to figure out what's most important and interesting to people. Like, I never did this, but I always thought it'd be a great idea for a column in a newspaper where just like every day I go to a comedy club and I talk about one joke people are talking about. Because it's like, the comedians sometimes bomb, sometimes they do well, but they're always looking for what actually matters to people today. And so, and that kind of gets lost in the literature, like people in the literature, they live in their own sphere. And so you might get what was important to people in that sphere, but not in the whole sphere. So for agriculture, especially in a place like China, which was so agrarian for so long, and actually continues to be very agrarian, it's almost like the comedy club of culture is the agriculture. You know what I mean? So this seemed like a good place to start. And then what did you find when you started digging into the rice versus wheat places?
Yeah, so I started looking into the anthropology of, okay, what was it like to be in a rice village? How did people farm rice? How did people farm wheat? And could that be related to cultural differences? And it was like everything that I read about rice farming was like, oh, that makes complete sense with life in southern China right now.
Can you give an example? Like
One example is that like rice depends on irrigation networks. So you have like, a river, and then you divert the river, and then that adds water to the fields of the different farmers. In contrast, wheat relies on rainfall. So like we're just there, it rains, and okay. You can imagine that having this system that we manage together requires us to coordinate our behavior, right? How much water I use affects how much water you can use. In a lot of these systems, I can't personally decide when to flood or drain the fields. I forgot to mention that rice grows in standing water, so you're like flooding the fields. I can't, as a single farmer, decide because it's a shared system. And so even if I think today's the best day to flood the field, if everybody around me disagrees, I just have to do the thing that everybody else wants.
Or you get ostracized because you flooded the field for everybody when it was good for you.
Exactly. Your behavior has a lot of those consequences towards other people. And so I call it coordination. Like, I think coordination is a key element of rice farming that, not to say that wheat farming had no coordination, but it's much less so than in rice farming. And so, okay, think of that coordination having to depend on other people in rice farming. And then think of like my life in Guangzhou, where it's like, oh, people would, if they had a thought that they thought might offend me, maybe not say that.
This is not helping coordination to just make people angry.
This could rock the boat.
Even if it doesn't necessarily, like, it may be, or another way to say the punishment for being uncoordinated is higher.
I think that's right.
If that makes any sense. So so in a lot of these areas, I remember you also told me an example of a Starbucks experiment you did. Tell people about the Starbucks experiment. This is crazy.
So the normal way that a psychologist would do studies like this, and what I did in the beginning, you take people to the lab, you give them cognitive tests, and tests on a computer or paper, stuff like that. I did all that. But when I was on the Fulbright, I was like, oh, I have time to really spend in China. I want to do a study in everyday life. Because, this psychology, I was inspired by seeing things in restaurants and on buses and stuff like that. And so I was, I had that year on the Fulbright. And I was like, all right, I want to find some way to elicit these differences in everyday life. And one day I was at a cafe in Beijing, and a person sitting, across the table, one table over and across, they got up. And as they got up, they kind of like pushed their chair back. And about a minute later, Fu Yuan, like a server, comes over and she squeezes behind the chair without moving it. And I was like, that's
a very interesting action.
That was like, that's it. Yeah, like in that little action is people's psychology, right? Do you push the chair or do you accommodate yourself to the environment? And again, think back to the rice village. In one, we're all interconnected. My behavior affects yours. Yep. You fit in, right? You don't impose yourself on other people. You're in an environment where you have to adjust to the social environment, the world around you.
Somebody might be sitting in that chair.
Exactly.
I'm not going to go push it back in if somebody is sitting there.
Maybe they'll get mad.
Maybe
somebody was using it. I don't know. And I think it's a split second default. They're not thinking about it hard, but there's something going on when they see that. And it had this element too of like, there's a lot of neat little psychological things in daily life if you pay attention for it. But the key that this had was I could go around China and I could replicate that scenario.
So you can go to Starbucks and put chairs in the middle of the
everywhere,
lane. Everywhere.
Right? And so that's what I did. So I spent a year basically going all around China and pushing chairs so that they were partially blocking the aisle. And then I would sit nearby on my, pretend to be on my computer, but really I'm observing other people. And I would just count how many people go through the chairs and move it, or how many people go through and they adjust their body and squeeze through.
Did anybody in the whole study, like NPC style, just keep walking through the chair? Just like, like
back and forth?
Yeah, just like straight through, not even moving it, just like bam, through.
Oh,
kicking it over.
Nobody
did that?
Nobody did that.
No total monsters?
There were a few times when an employee would come by and like notice that this chair was like conspicuously out of place.
Yeah.
And they'd go like, are you using this chair? And I just sheepishly, no, I'm not using it. Yeah. And then they go away, and then I'd like
put the chair.
I put it back, and then they'd come back, 15 minutes later, and they'd be like, "Are you using this?" And then then I'd eventually.
So what were the results?
Yeah, so the basic idea is that fitting in means you don't move the chair. In Guangzhou, where I taught high school, it was something like 3% of people move the chair. I mean, that's a really boring study to run. I mean, 97 people don't move the chair and 3% do. Shanghai is similar. Hong Kong is similar, like 5%. The Hong Kong example to me is really nice because it's in the rice area of China. People think it should be this like super individualistic place, but I think anybody who's spent time there is like, it has these elements of Western culture, but socially, people aren't individualistic like New York jerks, yelling at people in traffic. And
I'm walking here.
Yeah, it's not that, right? Singapore is similar, right?
Yeah.
So I go up to Beijing, and I'm doing the first Starbucks location that I'm going to test at. And first Starbucks, a woman walks by, she's maybe like 40, 50, sees the chairs, and audibly, like that, makes that, right? And if I can rewind, in Guangzhou, when somebody would move the chair, so the few that did move the chair, they'd like kind of
very surreptitiously
slight. You'd have to like really notice, like, did they move the chair, right? Yeah. This woman, no. One hand, second hand, that chair's out of there. That chair's out of there. My job's done.
北京人就这样，北京人就你等个事儿，那就
That's
it. Yeah.
It felt so comfortable to me. I was like, oh, that's the Beijing that I know and love. It's the, and to me, I think if I can read into her actions there, I think there's a sense of like justice in it. Yeah. Like that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
It's almost weirdly enough pro-social in that sense.
It is.
It's to say like, well, somebody's got to move this back because it's in the way. you know.
That's
But that fear of taking that first action is not there.
Yeah. It's like, do you stick your neck out?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because I don't think it's like pro-social or anti-social, right? Because for that woman who moved the chairs, it doesn't really benefit her to move the chairs, right? Like, she spent more time and effort to move these chairs. She's helping like the greater good or strangers or something like that, right?
Societal order, you know,
It is it reminds me of, like, sometimes I'm on the street and there's like a public shared bike that somebody's left in the middle of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's easiest to walk around it, but sometimes I'm that determined guy who's like, no, this shouldn't be here, and I and I move it. It's a personal cost, actually. So
But so what was the end result? How many people out of 100 in Beijing would move the chair?
Oh, I forgot to even say, in Beijing it was closer to 20%.
Okay.
So about 1 out of 5. So still not a majority.
But that's significantly, 3-4 times difference.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that I don't understand the how psychology does, statistical significance, but that would be significant, I'm guessing.
We had to do, I say we because I had a whole research team. Obviously I have to do statistics, and then I had to train other people to do this, because one of the big things you want to do is make sure that,
it's consistent.
It's consistent, and also that you're not biasing your own results, because I have expectations, right? I know what I think Northerners are like. And so what I did is I took a research assistant who's a student at a university in China, trained him, Lu Ming was his name, trained Lu Ming, all right, Lu Ming, let's go to a Starbucks, I'll teach you how to push the chairs together. And then, sent him off to all around China to do this study. And he had to be that guy who the employees were hassling all around China. So all told, we inconvenienced something like 800 people around China with these chair traps, and eventually published it, and
That's great. I love this idea about going about culture that way, because I will sometimes have a joke about intercultural stuff that works for the audience, but then as a kind of more as a researcher or a scholar, I'll think I don't really think that would hold up. People believe it, but I don't really think that. I almost feel like this interpretation is more popular than the reality it reflects, if that makes any sense. And so it always is, it's fascinating to see the amount of work and labor it takes into actually figuring out that problem. And then if you did this in a comedy show and you said that, people might still think oh, I think he's wrong. How do you, maybe this is not a big problem for you, but how do you deal with the fact that people seem so sure about what their culture is, and yet no one's done that for, name anything that people say that the culture reflects. Nobody's done that serious research about it and had the numbers. Do you just think that we're walking around with mostly inaccurate guesses about what our culture is like, or are we actually better at this than we think?
Yeah, I'm on the team that people are generally more accurate than at least researchers like to think.
Yeah.
One of my favorite pastimes in China is if I'm on a train, let's say going from Beijing to Shanghai.
Yep.
Chances are the person sitting next to me has spent time in both cities, and so then I'll say, "What do you think?" "Oh, you're from the south. What do you think of people in the north?" "Oh, you're from the north. What do you think of people in the south?" And that sort of informal impressions of the culture. Yeah. I find people
they're generally pretty accurate.
They know what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And how much of that is stereotype, how much of that is their own personal experience, but I would say they broadly agree. The one area where they really disagree is 礼貌. Who's polite and who's impolite. So they all agree that Northerners are more outgoing, talkative, gregarious, and Southerners are sort of shy and holding things in, introverted. But both sides think that the other side is impolite.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's because, what does polite mean?
What is polite?
Right?
Well, this is the sort of thing, it's for instance, if you, as you said with the tea, somebody's pouring you tea, that's their way of being polite. If your glass is empty, I've already failed. Really, I should be refilling it here, even in your hand, before you run out. Because to me, as a tea person, that's my way of being polite. But if you were, let's say that you were somebody who's I don't want to drink that much caffeine or whatever, you just had this in your head that you didn't want to keep drinking, the correct way to do that, potentially in Chinese culture, is literally to turn the cup over.
Yes.
Now, I have given you such a clear clue that I do not want to drink any more tea by turning this cup over, but somebody might see like, that's really rude. Like I would never like go to like eat dinner at your house and to show that I'm done, like start washing the dishes by myself or whatever. You could do that, but it would be like, I'm trying to be polite and help you, but it's not for the purpose of saying I'm full, you know? And, but at the same time, like, so somebody might have their cup refilled and refilled and refilled, and they say, these people are trying to, like, they're trying to cheat me. They're going to be charging me by the cup or something like that. I don't know what's going on, but it's like, maybe it's not polite, you know? So like, that's all up for interpretation, you know?
Can I offer an insight into the turning the cup over? I think that's a great example of that. I learned this years ago in China. I don't think that there's a good way to translate the word offer in English into Chinese. Or another example is the word rang in Chinese. Sometimes that means to make somebody do something. And sometimes it means to let somebody do something. Which I think to an American is crazy that those are the same words. Because the autonomy of the other person is really critical in English. Do you want to do this or do you not want to do this? But that word rang in Chinese, it ignores whether you want to do this or not, right? And what is offer, right? Offer is also like, I will present this to you. Do you want it or not? Right? And I think that's the weird thing in Chinese is that, why is that concept weird in Chinese? Because you give, right? And giving is not an autonomous thing, right? I give something to you.
If you were required to give it, it would be a service. It's not a gift. You know? And so it's interesting because in Chinese, if you're driving your electric bike and people are in the middle, you say rang lu, rang lu. Rang, like give, rang, the road, which in some ways means get out of my way. In other ways means open the way so that I can go. Like, it's almost both at once of saying simultaneously you should leave the space, but also that space should have been open in the first place. And so it's it is there a lot of things after living in China many, many years when you can't come up offhand with a great translation. It's one of those things where it's like, well, people must not say it that way. Because like the offer, I don't know, like 请求, like very, very like request, but like very, it's very like literary. Like nobody would ever like, even if you say like, oh, 请问, like, like excuse me, or we translate that as excuse me, it literally means may I, like, please ask, may I ask. Very rarely will you see anybody ask that, like say that. It's like very formal. You just kind of ask the question. And so there's these sorts of like translation gaps, like do those alert you to say there might be some interesting cultural thing there?
Those are the greatest places to start, I think, for cultural differences. They're and so fun as a language learner. One of the other ones, I don't know if you've ever thought about this question before, but oftentimes, in Indiana Jones, the movie, one of the old ones, there's like an invisible bridge that he has to walk out on, and he like spreads some sand so he can see the bridge, and then eventually he has to just kind of like step blindly. You know how you do that when you're like creating a Chinese sentence? You like put some words out and then you're like, oh, I hope I can fit the last word in there. And then sometimes you get there and you're like, I don't have the word that I need to finish the sentence, right? I find that when that happens in Chinese, often I want a noun. Like I've created the sentence so that there's a noun that should go there, and I can't find it. And what I have to do is like pull up the planks, get back to land.
And you say like, that wasn't the way they would have thought about sharing this idea.
Exactly. And what goes in there is oftentimes a verb. So like what should have been in my head should have been a noun.
You have an example of what you're thinking?
Yeah, so one is, it's hard to translate the word cause, meaning like what's the cause of cancer, something like that, as a noun. There's not really a good way to say that in Chinese, but there's tons of ways to say that as a verb. So you could say this 导致, like that leads to that, or this 产生 that, right? A verb, right? There's so many ways to say that as a verb, and I haven't found a good way to say that as a noun.
因起了什么什么, but that's a verb. But that's a verb. So it's like, because So what, I mean, do you then take this to say something about the culture as a whole that, that nouns themselves are processes rather than
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the result is irrelevant without knowing the process that led to it. Does that make sense?
So this is the lesson that I drew out of that. At the same time as I was doing the Fulbright, I was also doing freelance academic editing. So basically, like, professors would have the papers they're submitting to a journal, they'd send it to me and I'd edit them. And I found that to make the writing better, often what I was doing was they'd make a bunch of nouns and I would undo the nouns and put them into verbs. So like, here's an example. Participate in gambling activities was one. Engage in voting behavior, right, was another one. Do you mean vote?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that should just be one word and it's a verb, right? Participate in gambling activities. You mean gamble, right? Like, weirdly.
But it's like the participation was the verb, and then the activity you almost had to have. Also, sometimes in Chinese grammar, you have like almost like a block on either end of things, like, 因为所以, like you have to have an A and then a B. And so sometimes, like, when you have certain verbs, you have to have a noun, but the noun just kind of grammatically has to be there. It's the verb that's doing the real punching. And so I mean, that's fascinating. I think that these are the sort of things. It's almost like comedy in the sense that these are the sort of things like that would happen that I'd notice, and I'd say, like, engage in voting activities. You mean vote? You're almost at a joke already. And it's these little things that made it so fun to do comedy between the cultures. And now even coming back here to the States, these are the things I'm kind of almost noticing about our own country. And like, things that I think regular people take for granted. Like, sometimes like you'll have this, like you'll have these fancy, like the stoplights, there's like a stop and a walk guy, but sometimes they have like the walk figure actually walking. And I'm like, was anybody not aware that like that was the walk thing? Like we had to literally animate this like in order to make it happen. And then I start thinking about like, like why is it that we just keep overdoing this stuff and making it like, making it more complicated. Whereas like in China, the last time I went back, there were new streetlights in Beijing. I was away long enough I didn't, that they had replaced the streetlights, and they had replaced it with an actual functional new light that was a bicycle green and a bicycle red.
Oh, nice.
So like this is like the bikes are go, but the cars are stop. And that was actually really useful in Beijing. But I don't think I've ever seen stuff like that here in LA, but maybe that's just because they didn't build the city for the bikes. So we're running out of time in this first half. We're about to take a little bit of a break. But again, thanks Thomas for coming. We're gonna be back in just a moment, drinking another tea, and I'll see you in just a moment. I'm Jesse.
I'm Thomas.
And we'll see you soon.
It's time for battle with the new fun mobile game, Battle of Battles. Battle your friends, your enemies, and even other battles. And maybe after your 10th, 100th, or 1000th battle, you'll realize that violence doesn't really solve anything. So many battles. And what comes of it? More battles. It's like, we don't want to battle, but we don't know how not to battle. So if you're battling and don't want to battle, maybe try some really good tea, like Jesse's Tea House. Jesse gets his teas straight from small tea shops and tea farmers in China and puts them into his subscription service. Just use the code JessePod for $10 off your first order of $30 or more and stop this endless battling. God damn it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tea Time with Jesse. I am Jesse, here with Thomas Talhelm.
Hi, everybody.
Cultural expert, professor, Chinese speaker, and also man who takes dirty air and makes it less dirty.
That's right.
So this was kind of the funny thing. Like I get to see this happening in real time when I was living in China. Was the birth of Smart Air. So real quickly, what is Smart Air?
Yeah, Smart Air is a social enterprise that I started in China. We make low-cost air purifiers, and we have educational workshops to teach people about air pollution, how to protect themselves, how to build their own air purifier. That's pretty much it.
Very cool stuff. Air purifiers were a big deal in China. We'll go kind of through what it used to be like before Smart Air and before kind of the cheap air purifier revolution, because they used to have them in like the US Embassy, and they were like $8,000 a giant thing, and it was kind of a thing. So we'll get through that, but before we do that, we got to start to have the second tea. Nice. I asked Thomas what he wanted. He said he hadn't had any good pu'er in a while, and so I figured I would make you the 2010. This is my friend Dui Dui's 2010 Reserve Show pu'er tea. Very, very nice. It's tear off a little piece here. It's actually packed really loose, which I like in the cakes.
Nice.
We also sell these in 50-gram bags, so like we actually pay people to chop apart the cakes and put them into smaller bags because
It helps.
It helps. It's like it's kind of like, it's funny. Everybody in China is like, "What do you mean you want us to hack apart the cakes?
Yeah.
Like, just have people buy a whole cake." And I'm like, Americans are not going to spend that much money on tea, especially like a show pu'er that they haven't tried before.
Yeah.
But for people that love it, we're here for it. So
It's a big commitment. The whole cake is it's gonna last a long time.
yeah, exactly. So here we are, and give it a little bit of a steep. First wash. For the aged pu'er, I usually do a wash and kind of get a chance to try that smell. Isn't that good?
Very rich. Yeah.
Yes, very rich. This is like a very like powerful dark, rich tea. The cooked pu'er taste is not to everybody's flavor.
Feed the animals.
Yeah, I gotta get the animals, especially now that we have the pu'er here. You can pour on whichever animals you would like. This is Chonky Horse.
Okay.
And that's Pendor.
He is kind of chunky.
Yeah, Chonky. He's thick. Look at that, good boy. Like my best Instagram post of all time is just a picture of him on my hand, and I said, "Oh Lord, he coming!" And like that got more likes than anything else I've done in the entirety of running the channel. He was a big success. People love the Chonky Horse. By the way, if people are in the position to drink tea yourselves, get out your tea, join us for the second half of the show. We are happy to have you sitting with us.
I was gonna say this pu'er totally makes sense to do second.
Yeah.
When you suggested that, like, yeah, you don't want to start with a pu'er and then
Yeah.
move to something lighter.
Sometimes people ask, like, how do you, if you're doing multiple teas in a day, or if you have friends over and you want to try, like, we have an 8-tea sampler. So, like, you get 8 different teas. If you have your friends come over, you should try 2, 3, 4 different teas. Like, give them a try. I generally like going from lighter to darker.
Yeah.
And then, like, from sweeter to more complex or rich.
Yeah. I would describe this as like earthy.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that can sound bad, but like, no, it's pleasant.
It's like a pleasant earthiness, and especially once you know it's going to taste different than other tea you've had before, then you're kind of like there for it, and it's very warming to the stomach. So this is what I drink if I have like stomach problems as well.
You know, I would sometimes in the winter in Beijing. Cheers. Thanks for the tea.
Yes.
Sometimes in the winter in Beijing, I would get one of those roasted sweet potatoes on the street, and then I'd eat the whole thing, and it'd be like too much. I'd like overeat. I would have been like super hungry, and then now I'm like way too full. Yeah. And there was a little tea place that's now shut down years ago, but I would get the pu'er after that, and pu'er just seems like a good after meal tea to me. In a way that a green tea, I just like not. Yeah.
This is also like if you go to a lot of dim sum restaurants, they serve really weak pu'er, partially because they're just re-steeping it the whole time. They're not making. It's not a tea house. They're not making it for the tea to be amazing. But for whatever reason, weak pu'er I feel goes really well with dim sum. Maybe it's just that I have a lot of positive memories of eating dim sum and drinking that tea. But it's like it has enough flavor that it's not water. But it's also, when it's weak like that, it's not trying to overwhelm the flavor of the food. Yeah. When you make it like this, you're having it for tea. So it is rich. What do you think of that?
Yeah, this is really good. It's really strong, very full-bodied. Yeah, there's nothing weak about this.
Very smooth. Yeah, this is definitely one of the. Dueda is a real good guy. He's one of my original tea buddies for years and years and years. He took me to all these different great tea mountains. Last time I was back, we went to Laobanjiang, we went to Bingdao, we went to all these places. He drove this 10-person Lincoln Navigator through the tea mountains, and every time we took a turn, he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take this He should, it's already hard to take a wide turn on those things. He didn't care. He'd be going right down the middle of the two-way road, and every time we were gonna hit a turn, I was like, and this is how I die. Yeah. And we make it through one more turn, and 15 seconds later, I'd be like, and this is how I die. And then it was just like that for hours.
I remember taking a bus in Yunnan province in the part that's kind of near Tibet. Yeah. And this is remote in the mountains, and there were parts where there had been landslides or rock slides over the road. And so the road, should be flat, but now it has this part where rocks are, and so it's angled. And I was in the bus on the window seat. Yeah. And it would go over, and the right side of the bus would rise more than the left side. And what that would give me is a wonderful view of the cliff that we would fall down if this was a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, oh, and could die, and
Yeah.
then now we're back to the earth.
That sort of, I mean, I avoided that experience the first time I went on a long-term bus in Yunnan because I took the sleeper bus. So I went to sleep and I was like, either I wake up or I don't. If I wake up, great, I'm in Yunnan, I'm down at the tea hills. If I don't, I probably won't know. So yeah, either way, I win, right?
Yeah.
And I saved a bunch of money over flying to Jinghong from Kunming. A bunch of money at the time. Seemed like a real, like, important decision. And now, like, coming back and dealing with American prices, I was like, I really did risk my life to save, like, whatever, $80 or whatever it was.
$5.
Anyway, getting back into smart air. So, so basically, for those who don't know, the air pollution is a big problem in Beijing. Not just in Beijing, but really like a lot of places around the world. I think people don't necessarily recognize how much stuff there is in the air.
That's right.
And so, like, how did the idea to like do air purifiers start?
Also on the Fulbright. So we were there 2012, 2013. You know, Beijing has had an air pollution problem for a while, but I want to say it was January 2013, it got so bad that it was in news.
The fell winter of 2012. I remember this. That was our first. Yeah, that was when we were there on Fulbright.
Yep.
We hit 500 AQI regularly on the reg, and there was a brewery called Jing A, which had a beer called Airpocalypse, and they would discount the beer if the air pollution was really bad because no one was going out to the bar because you would walk outside, you would inhale, you get headaches. You just couldn't see anything, and you'd be walking out in this fog. And for whatever reason, it was so much more demoralizing than like going to San Francisco and there's fog. You know, it was like it felt very unnatural. So so Beijing smoggy.
Yeah, Beijing smoggy. You know, you talk about symptoms. I kept thinking I was getting colds. Be like, oh, I got a sore throat, I'm coughing. But then I'd have it for a few days, and then it would get better, and then I'd have it again, and then it would get better, and then eventually I was like, I don't think this is a cold. Like, this is something different. And then, you know, the apocalypse happens. And I went out to buy an air purifier, and the one that everybody was buying back in the day, I don't know if you were aware of this or remember this, the IQ Air was the one that everybody bought. It cost like $1,000.
They were really expensive, and it was and they were big.
Huge.
And it was definitely made, like air purifiers back then had the feel of a luxury item. It's like if you went into a place and they wanted to impress you about how much money they had, they would have an air purifier running because it's like only us get to have the nice air.
Yeah. And you can see it in their ads. Like their ads would be like a Swedish family with blonde hair and white furniture, you know, like who gets white furniture, you know, especially in a polluted place.
Yeah.
And, you know, like the blonde children are playing with this white furniture and the IQ Air is there. But, you know, we were just there on the Fulbright, also breathing air. And don't have $1,000 to spend on this. I often joke that the Fulbright is really prestigious, but the pay is not prestigious, right? Like you don't get paid that much money.
Yeah, somebody called me a Fulbright welfare queen once, and I was like, "That first of all, thank you for my Halloween costume, and second of all, we didn't make a lot of money. It was like, you know, Fulbright was unbelievably fundamental in helping me start my life, and I would not be here doing Chinese culture without the Fulbright. But it was not the greatest job money-wise that I had.
You're not living high.
I made more as a Chinese comedian than I did on Fulbright. So as an example, but.
I was, you know, doing the freelance academic editing partly to keep the
bills. So anyway, but so you didn't want to spend $1,000 on an air purifier.
And it just something seemed wrong about it to me. Like, you don't know what's in there and how they work, right? Like that's
it's literally a magic box.
It's a magic box. You push the button, clean air comes out, right? But I was like, I just don't think that there's something in there that costs $1,000. And so I did research, and by research, it pretty much starts and ends on the Wikipedia page. There's a thing in there called a HEPA filter, HEPA. It's just a mat of like polyester fibers, essentially. So if you have like a sports shirt, like some stretchy fabric, same thing, right? If you have like a sponge or something, it's made out of that same sort of fabric. Just plastic fibers. These were invented in the 1940s.
Really?
They've been around for 70 years. Yeah.
What were they filtering at that time?
So they were actually developed in the Manhattan Project. So when they were developing the atomic bomb, they were concerned, like, wait a second, what if there are atomic, radioactive particles in the air?
Them.
Yeah, and so they developed these filters. That's the technology. So what that means is they're not patented, right? Also, it's a mature technology, so lots of people have had, time to develop these. And I was like, wait a second, I bet people are making these HEPA filters in China. And so I went on to Taobao, which is like the eBay of China, and found a HEPA filter for like 110 RMB, so like $18 maybe. And I had a fan at home, and so I just strapped the HEPA filter once it came to a fan, and then that was the first do-it-yourself, DIY air purifier that I ever made.
Yeah, and so and the coolest thing about this is like I remember you telling me about doing this, and then I was like, well, I remember the first time you said it, I was like, that's very interesting. I bet it has some effect. But he probably didn't like actually create a scientific, I still had a lot of faith in the big box and the magic box. I was like, there's something about that will make it work where like this fan surely has to fail. Maybe it'll get 20 or 30% of the pollution out, but like not the actual pollution. But then in that same dinner, it was literally probably like 20 seconds later, you were like, and I have the data. And so how did you get the data to see whether your thing actually worked?
So I put this purifier next to my bed, turned it on every night as I was sleeping. Within a few weeks, I took a picture of the filter every week, and the fan was circular and the filter's rectangle.
Yeah.
And so you could just see every week as it went by, this middle circle just going to like brown to black to like really black, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's like, okay, clearly it's capturing something. But that, as a PhD student at the time, and there's that part of me that's like, I want data on this. I want to test it. I also wanted to know is it getting the really, really small particles? Because, there's larger particles and then there's the small ones that can like really penetrate deep into the lungs. A scary side fact, if a particle is small enough, it can actually directly enter the bloodstream. So if there's like lead or something in the air, some of that can go straight into your blood.
Oh, yeah, that explains so much about who I am.
Yeah, it is terrifying.
Yeah, right? But so how did you? What was the result after running it? You saw physically that it was working.
Yeah.
But like doing something. But then how did you do anything resembling a controlled test?
So I went out and I bought a laser particle counter. So this is a machine, it's a box with it samples air, and then it's got a laser inside to detect the really small particles. That thing cost me over $300. So just for reference, the purifier itself is like $30 maybe, and the laser particle counter is like $300. So it cost me more to test it than it did to build it. But it gave me the data, and it gave me knowledge. I was buying knowledge, right?
Yep.
And so I did tests, and it showed like, yes, even the small particles, it was capturing those. And then, it was getting my room down, like 80, 90% reductions in these small particles in my bedroom. And so
just by strapping the fan on there. I remember this, I had one. I'll see if I can pull up my old pictures from my apartment in Beijing, but I bought one of these. You did these DIY workshops. And so like we would show up at like, a bar or like, the Hutong Courtyard or something like that. And it was like, we're gonna do a DIY thing, and it starts with savaging this box fan, and then like taking these like straps and like kind of like BDSMing the HEPA filter on there, and then everything about it was like, it was really funny. It was such a contrast to the beautiful, mysterious white box that I was like instantly like, I'm like if he says this works and he has the data, like I see why they make that box beautiful, because that's what this thing is. It's a fan blowing air through the thing.
That's
and
right.
if you don't make it look beautiful, then it's going to be hard to believe. I mean, people won't believe it.
Yeah.
Right?
People didn't believe it.
People didn't believe it.
People called me names on the internet. That's for sure. There was an employee of Blue Air, which is that's a Swedish company.
Yep.
And
by the way, I don't have anything in for the Swedes. We have Swedish customers. If you're a beautiful blonde family with your white furniture, we still want you to buy the tea.
You can enjoy tea. But you can have an air purifier.
So I think that Sweden's caught some strays in this episode. But yeah, continue. So what did the Blue Air person tell you?
Oh, the people online were like, I'm posting the data. So it's like grad student, straps together purifier for $20 and posting the data, and I kept telling people, I'm not an expert, but like this is how I tested it.
Yeah.
Here's the data. If I did anything wrong, tell me.
Yeah.
And I think that guy was mad because he actually probably does really sophisticated things and designs a beautiful purifier and really, does a good job. But, it costs $1,000.
Yeah.
And so people were like, oh, he's a psychologist. What does he know? And, people attack me. But I think you have the right idea, which is that seeing how ugly it is, one of the benefits of doing that is to demystify it.
Yeah.
Is to say, hey, everybody, this is how it works.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't use this homemade purifier in your own home, or you use this for a month and then you go out and buy another one, at least now I've equipped you with the knowledge to know that you don't need to spend $1,000 on this.
Well, because it's like, here's what it is. It's air being pushed through a filter of some sort. And then you can modify the filter. You can modify how much air is going through probably, and probably how loud the fan is or whatever.
Yep.
Like, I'm sure there's a lot of sophisticated engineering that goes into making the high-end ones. But it's like, but it was something like even living in Beijing, where we would there would be hospitals and stuff like that would advertise in their brochures they had air filters in the hospital. I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't know what it was doing. I feel like it's like an HVAC system. Like, I don't know what an air conditioner is. If the air conditioner you put in the window, I hope it works.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it's actually doing. And so it was kind of cool to see, okay, air, filter, and then you have the filter and they get dirty really fast.
Yeah.
Actually, the concern I had is sometimes you would say like, oh, the filter will last like 3 months or however long it lasted.
6 months.
6 months. And like, it would be so dirty by week 2, I'd be like,
Yeah.
it must be full, right?
Yeah.
But apparently they can last. Again, this is the good thing about the data. You can find this out.
Yeah.
So you started slamming these together, and then what kind of came out of that?
Yeah. So first I was like, put the data online. Newspapers started reporting on this. Like I said, headline is grad student straps together, $20 purifier. Then I started doing these workshops like the one that you saw, teaching people. So I would buy the fans, buy the filters, charge people an entrance fee, basically covering costs, maybe a little bit extra. We could charge people 200 RMB, so like $20 to come in. And then that was pretty much it. Like that was my plan. But at the end of that, so we did 3 workshops. And at the end of that, we were like, wait a second, I think there's a market for this. Like there's been so much interest in these workshops that maybe we should just do this. So we started a website, smartairfilters.com, started a Taobao store, so like we're on the eBay of China. And we didn't have a product, we just had fans and filters and straps.
So you would send people a kit.
Well, we would strap it together.
Okay.
So like in an apartment.
That's value
in
add,
Beijing.
people.
That is the value add.
That's value add. That's like a true.
It really is, because you send people a kit.
No, it is.
Like 1% of people are going to do that.
Well, you're the business school professor. Like you tell me what the value is. No, but yeah, but no, it was like really funny, and I remember I think you had 2 sizes. I seem to remember.
Yeah,
there was the big box fan and the little fan.
Yep, we had the small one. We called it the original.
Yeah.
And then we had the Canon.
Yeah, the Canon. I remember the Canon.
The stronger one.
It did look like a Canon. It was like, but yeah, so anyways, you started doing this and you started building it, and was there a market?
So it's one of those funny things where like the first week we started the website, my friend Gus was helping me do it. And I was just holding myself back because I wanted to ask him every day, how many orders did we get? How many orders did we get? And at the end of the first week, I think it was like 5. Okay. And one of those was yours.
Was it? Was I one of the first 5?
You were one of the first.
There we go. I felt I was late on the train. I was like this, it turns out I wasn't.
Yeah, excellent. You were early.
Excellent.
And so first week, it's this gap between like, I'm sending my baby into the world and admire, right? And then 5 orders. But then within a few weeks, it just snowballed. And soon enough, it was like December and Shanghai got hit with really bad air pollution. And then we were just buried under orders. We had so many more orders than we had time to like ship everything and pack everything together. Yeah. There were days, so by this point I'm back in Virginia doing my PhD, have to work on my dissertation. There were days I would bike into the office, answer Smart Air emails all day, get back on my bike and bike home. I didn't work on my dissertation or anything that I was supposed to be working on, just because Smart Air was taking off.
And I mean, I've gone through moments of having that similar sort of craziness with the tea company. Like, it's weird because as humans, you like to think I put in a day's worth of effort, I get a day's worth of result, but the internet doesn't work that way.
No.
The internet is like, if it goes viral, you get like a year's worth of stuff in like 3 days and then it goes away.
Yep.
And then it's very difficult to plan.
It's
like
impossible,
when
yeah.
you do that sort of thing. So like sometimes people are like, I really do apologize to people who come to the website and you see stuff is out of stock. It's like it's a sign of like the way the internet works. It's like we're not paying for ads, so I don't get to control how many people see the thing. And the fact that we're not paying for ads is what makes us all work, by the way, because if you had to pay for all these ads, we would not be able to sell the tea for what we sell it for.
Yeah.
It works because people actually go to the site and see like I would much rather spend an hour of my time doing this and like hire like we have a camera person here, we have a couple basic lights, then give Google this money. Like which to Google is like absolutely nothing. But so how did you deal with that growth and where did it go?
Man, first just on your Google thing, doing Smart Air really taught me like we cannot at our price point eat the cost of advertising.
Yeah.
You can that only works if you're really ripping people off.
People don't appreciate how expensive that online advertising is,
really
but
is.
also it's because they have very complicated computer systems designed to make sure there's no benefit to the ad. Like the moment they realize the ad is working, it gets more expensive.
Yep.
So like it's like I'm not going to say the entirety of online advertising is rigged, but I will say it's been very difficult to find people that show for regular businesses that it works. That's all I'm saying. I think on the other flip side of it though is that if you did have millions of dollars to spend on advertising, you would train their algorithms really, really well.
Yeah.
So if you were willing to eat a couple $1 million worth of ad money, you probably would come out on the other side. But I think that is a completely unsolicited advice for everybody out there, but I think you'd agree. It's like by making a good product and then sharing it in a story that people actually understand. That's like a far better use of your time than like raising money to go and give to Google. For to do ads.
I mean that's what. So I founded Smart Air. I call it a social enterprise. So it's not the goal for me is not to make money.
Yeah.
I wanted to solve a problem out there of helping people breathe clean air and educating people. I mean, you can go to our website right now. I will teach you how to build an air purifier, and that doesn't require you buying anything from me. My instructions don't involve you buying anything from me. And to me, that's a win, right? So,
well, also I think it's sort of the thing is like I make all this tea stuff, and it's like you don't need to get my tea. Like it's not a secret. You can go and get other tea in other places, or porcelain in other places, or even tea pets in other places. It's like I think that the knowledge shouldn't be gate kept that tight. And so that's where you get into. It also is just like you get into the mystery box syndrome. You get into that black box syndrome. And like it's just I don't like living in that world. I don't like living in a world where I have to be careful about which secrets I keep. It's just a crappy way to go through everyday life. So I like that the energy behind it. So
and I think there's a way to make that work as a company. And so I think the people who buy Smart Air purifiers are people who like the fact that we are open about what we're doing. We put our data online. We say, hey, here's another way to do it if you want to do it. I don't ask people to trust me. I say, trust the data, trust the science. We put it all out there.
And by the way, we're not sponsored by Smart Air. Like I'm not making any money by sharing Smart Air. Like it really is like, I love that data-driven way of doing things because just like with the culture, like, we run into this problem with the tea. People will be like, if we say we have Chinese tea, some people on the internet will be like, it must be polluted. And then the same people apparently have no worries about Japanese tea. But like, it's not coming from data in either sense. Like there is assuredly some tea in China. Believe me, I've tried some of it that's like so heavy with pesticide, you taste it when it's swimming in the water. But like, it doesn't mean inherently that because it's from China, it's polluted, or because it's from Japan, it's pure, or something like that. It's not based off of data, and I would just love for more of the discourse around like whether it's culture and this is both culture and public health, to be based off of like reality, or at least an attempt to find reality. And so it was one of the things that I really loved to see. Like you actually even if it wasn't a perfect scientific experiment, you had like experiments. You also had graphs, which is really important. People, if you want to convince people of things,
gotta have graphs.
Yeah, they're not going to read the words.
Yeah,
You gotta
no.
have you gotta have graphs. So.
As a scientist, I also know that. People want the figures and don't read the paper.
So yeah, so anyway, so you started doing this, and then you know, so even now people can go and make it themselves, or you have like actual products now, right?
Yeah, and so the goal was, I started teaching people how to do the homemade purifier, and pretty soon it was obvious that there were a bunch of people out there who were like, this is great and all, but like I don't want something that ugly. Or like, I have kids at home, I don't need them sticking their fingers in the fan, I just want something that's smooth, I plug it in and it works. And I was like, that's what I wanted to.
Yeah.
I never wanted to make my own air purifier.
You're saying
I just
that your vision of perfection was not the Canon?
Yeah, I know. This long Velcro strap. And so after that, what we did is, okay, let's make just honest air purifiers. We'll just make air purifiers that work.
Yeah.
Cut the gimmicks. We don't have friggin' apps or like timers and fancy lights and stuff like that. Like, just give me clean air.
Yeah.
Based on data, it just works. And so now our first air purifier is called the Square. So like air, like AIR, Square.
Nice.
And then now we have a whole series, ones that are big enough to do like a whole office or like a library or restaurant or something
What
like that.
do you do if you run out of puns? Like for the name, like, because you've already committed to the pun route.
Yeah, we have some boring one. I mean, our new one's called the SA600.
Oh, that's
it's painful.
I just have a great respect for anybody that puts like a real investment into a pun.
We took a long time with that one.
Yeah,
we tested the heck out of that one.
Yeah. So but anyway, so you started coming out with other stuff, and what was that like? Like how, like, because were you like literally visiting factories and everything and trying to figure out how to do this, or?
Yeah, that was it. So like visiting factories, getting quotes, finding all the HEPA filters we could all over China, and then testing them, because that was one of the big things. Is like people would tell us like, oh, this HEPA filter's better, or this one's half the price, and then we test it and go like, oh, it's half the price because it's crap.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies, they don't care. It says HEPA filter. They said this is the data on it, so that's good. But
Dude, it's like tea. It's like, I like every day I get 2, 3, 4 people who are like, I'm trying puer for the first time and tastes fishy. It tastes bad. I'm like, where do you get it? And they're like, Amazon. Where on Amazon? I don't even know. Well, there's a whole market that just exists to take advantage of people that are just going to hit price low to high, and then just like go and do the thing. And it's not to say that there shouldn't be budget options, because I'm sure that even that crappy HEPA filter is going to be better than like literally nothing. Yeah. But it's like there's a lot of money that gets made off of the fact that people are just so overwhelmed with life that they just can't handle it.
That's right.
And so that's, in some ways with the tea, it's like I almost feel like half of the service I give is just to say, like, I don't have 1,000 teas on the site. Like, I'm going to, like, everything that goes on there is going to be at least good enough that I drink it every day. And like, if you really want to get like to the deep nitty gritty of all the sort of the highest of the highest of the highest quality, like, I might not have that on the site. I have those teas probably in my personal collection, but I may not have it on the site, but like, but I can definitely help you avoid the other side, which is the crappy stuff.
That's worth a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth a lot for me as somebody who buys tea.
So you were there, and so you actually tested the products, and you were able to come out with the way to do it. And what was it like building something from scratch from a factory in China?
So I started Smart Air 2013.
Yeah.
We had 3 founders. We sat at a table eating dinner one day and going like, we'll make an air purifier. We'll manufacture our own air purifier.
Yeah.
We didn't come out with the first air purifier like manufactured until 2017.
Wow.
I want to say. So that was like 4 years. So it's a lot harder than you think, right? I mean, if you just start throwing money around, you can get something made.
Yeah.
Or if you don't care what if it doesn't need to be your machine, if you want to just white label, slap your label on something that's already out there, you can get something manufactured in China in 6 months.
Yep.
But that's not what we wanted to do.
No.
Like, we wanted to make our own thing. By the way, so now we have this whole series. You mentioned the puns, and so I'll add another one. This is our new portable air purifier.
Nice.
This is called the QT3.
I like it.
It's a cutie, right? Yeah. QT. People say it looks like a heater, like an old school radio, kind of, with the little thing here. But it's just a fan and a filter. So there's a filter in here that you can pop out. If I can.
Can you hold it from the bottom?
There we go. So it's just just a little filter on the inside, just a fan that's now pretty gross because I've been using this. But this came out, this was a big deal in COVID because this is portable, and so people would like, oh, I got to go to the dentist, I don't want to catch COVID, or like, I got to go sit in the classroom.
So this was interesting. So during COVID, I saw that you were actually coming out with like real data in a time when everybody was like nuts. Like real data about whether the HEPA filters caught COVID particles or not.
That's right.
And then do they?
They do.
They do.
So HEPA filters, masks, they capture viruses. We also were doing a ton of tests on DIY masks because that was a big thing early on in COVID.
Yep.
And our data actually got picked up by several news organizations. So there were like news organizations reporting on the tests that we were doing, on DIY masks. So that was super cool. And people were like, oh, you're biased or whatever, you're selling masks. Like, we don't even sell masks. We're just doing this for the public good.
Yeah. Which makes people very suspicious. There's nothing. It'd be better to have a profit motive.
At least then I could understand what you're doing.
Yeah, but but again, I just really like it's such a like I sometimes feel like as a performer and as a a guy that makes videos, I feel like it's such a weapon against the stuff I hate, against this sort of like this like knee jerk. Like, oh, our culture is better than yours. Their culture is better. Like that sort of stuff. To be able to make good video, it's just such a weapon to be able to share real stories and real culture with people. And then everybody by themselves will realize that a lot of that sort of like hyper nationalistic or like hyper extremist stuff is just doesn't have anything under it. And similarly, I look at almost at what you do and like having the actual data to test whether the DIY masks work or whether the filters work. And again, as you said, one factory might make a better filter. It may not be as simple as they work or they don't. It's like we got the one that worked. It just seems like it's such a weapon to be able to use against that sort of misinformation.
I think that's exactly right. Speaking of misinformation, should we talk about my water study? Before we,
So we're going to be wrapping up soon, but before we go, this is something I know everybody will be interested in as a tea person, and you're really rewarded if you waited until the end because everybody asked me this question. So everybody asked me what type of water is the best water to make tea with. And because you're a data guy, you actually tested this. So tell me about your water data test, and then I can refer everybody else from now on to this video.
Cool.
Yes.
So this is all based on my experience going to the tea shops in China, going to Tea City in Beijing. You and I have both been there. I get these green teas. I get these Longjing, Dragon Well, and I taste them in the tea stall, and be like, oh, this is an amazing tea. Then I take it back to Chicago. Start drinking it at home and be like, this is just not as good. And like, what is, I loved this in the tea shop, and now it's, the suspicious side of me is like, oh, they're switching out the tea, they're giving me the good ones, and then they switch, but it's like, no, that's not
it. But again, without information, you start thinking you're getting tricked, and it's like, that's a human thing, it just happens.
Totally human.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think I was traveling, I bought water at the store for some reason. And I was like, holy cow, this water's really good, or this tea is really good.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think it was the water. And so I started doing tests. And as the psychologist, I know people are biased. If you believe something works, you're gonna think it tastes better, whatever.
Yeah.
So I started doing blind taste tests. And so I started at home. I would literally blind, not looking at this, I'd test, so tap water. I'd do like Brita water, so like a simple
filter.
A simple filter. And then the third one that I'd use is first it was distilled water from the store, so like a jug of distilled water. And then later I got a reverse osmosis system in my home because of these tests. So it's like
it seems like your hobby exists to get you really expensive equipment that is really not like, it's not like you're like, oh, I'm gonna like make a TV show so I get a really nice camera that I can use elsewhere. It's like a reverse osmosis system is not really useful for much else. Laser particle detector.
All that money I saved on air purifiers, I'm now spending on water systems.
So you got, so distilled or reverse osmosis water as the final.
So like same amount of tea. I think I would even measure it in grams using a scale just to make sure that the tea was the same. Pour it all out, and then blind have somebody hand me the different teas. And I've since replicated this with other people. Like you'd think like, oh, maybe a tea expert can tell the difference. No.
Regular people.
I'd have people over at my house and say, let's do the experiment. have them all out, again, them blindfolded, it's immediately obvious. The distilled water or the RO, the reverse osmosis water, hands down the best.
Really?
Right? That experiment has never failed. And you can even see it in the color. So if you do a green tea, I don't know how it necessarily would work with a darker tea. And by the way, I think with a pu'er, this probably wouldn't matter, but with a tea where the flavor is more delicate. So if you have like an Earl Grey, whatever, it's so
that's
strong.
So that's the anything where the water, like that first tea we had with the word they say in Mandarin, tian shui, like, sweet water, like, that's the, if it's got that sweet water taste, it'll definitely work better from the thing. My really janky version of this test was I actually, in the last summer, I went to the Smoky Mountains, and the Airbnb we had, the tap water was very sulfurous. Like it was very sulfurous. It was safe to drink, I'm sure, but it smelled bad. And then so when we were hiking in the woods, they had this small stream, and I remember that Luyu, and the real tea heads know Luyu. Luyu said the best source for tea water is a swiftly moving mountain stream from the middle where there's no sediment collected. And so I had an empty Gatorade bottle and I filled it up with river water and boiled it for 5 minutes or whatever to make sure it wasn't going to kill me. And it was much better. It was clearly better than what came out of the tap. And I think that the water quality really can affect the quality of the tea. So do you keep distilled water on hand in order to drink tea now?
So at home I use the RO system when I travel with my green tea. Yes,
you should recommend it to me because I need one of those. I'm using filtered water, but maybe I should be getting a reverse osmosis. That's a business expense, right?
Yeah, it
totally,
should be for you.
Totally.
And what I'll say is, if you have a glass, glass like this, try it with a green tea.
Yeah.
So try this test. You could even just do tap versus distilled. What the color will look like is if you in the RO water, the distilled water, it's much lighter, I would say a little bit greener and a lot clearer. With the tap water, it's got sort of a yellow hue to it, almost brown. It doesn't even look appetizing. I mean, like from looking at it, you would pick.
You would say you would pick which one to pick.
That's the better one. But again, the blind taste test, you can taste it immediately.
Cool. I feel like this is like setting us up. We should now cut to me trying this out on my neighbor.
Oh, totally should.
Like it would be fun. I think because I think the water quality really does matter. I remember the one of tea people, the really high-end tea people have all these like weird dreams, like they have these like visions for the perfect way they want to make tea. And I remember I met this one guy who was like he was my age, but he was like very wealthy Chinese family. He like has much time to spend on as much money to spend on tea as he wanted, and he would be like, Jesse, one day I want to go to the Himalayas, and I want to drink like pure water from the runoff of the Himalayan sacred mountains, and then you should come with me and we should hike up there and drink water from those tea mountains. And then secretly in my head I was like, I'm gonna have to be really turn into much bigger of a tea guy than I am now to do that. But now I'm like, that'll be a hell of a YouTube. I'm not there, but I'm closer than I was when he said that sounds like a good idea. But
prayer flags flapping in the wind.
Exactly. So to reiterate, distilled is best, and then compared to the Brita or the tap, what was better?
Oh, each step up you get in terms of filtration, the more you can filter the junk out, the better it was. So like the Brita was better than the tap, but really just to get everything out of there. So distilled water, by the way, is everything's out of there. It is just water.
H2O.
Right? Just water. So there's no minerals, there's no chlorine, there's no pesticides.
So you don't need any sort of like mineral like to help the flavor adhere or whatever to your mouth?
So I'm not an expert in the chemistry of tea, but what I've read about it is that having minerals and other stuff in the water actually oxidizes the tea, and that could help explain why it's also the color difference. So
that would also explain why the green tea benefits the most from it, because the green tea is unoxidized, and so you want to keep it unoxidized. Whereas maybe if you're having a black tea or something that's fully oxidized, it won't matter as much. I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, so that's very cool. We're about to finish up, but before we finish up, what did you think of the Dui Dui's 2010?
This is a great pour. This is a solid pour. One thing I'll say about pour is that it is super reliable.
Yeah.
I've had the fishy that you've said, so there are some cheap ones that are really bad. But once you get up above the bad, you know, it's a reliable friend.
Yeah.
Whereas like when you're in the green tea,
Green tea can be up and down, and it can be, and also like, this one sat for 2 years or whatever,
Yeah.
so that it definitely has that reliability. So
This is
I
great.
I want to finish up, right before we finish, I want to be able to do just like a little bit of a lightning round.
Sure.
So I'm going to give you just quick questions and then like very short answers,
Let's do it.
All right, very cool. So first question, what was your favorite tea to drink when you were in China?
Definitely Dragonwell, so Longjing.
All right, very cool. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to get started in cultural studies?
Ooh, I would say spend a lot of time in another culture and ideally learn the language if you're in it for the long run.
Very cool. What advice do you give to people who are interested in getting into like data studies?
Ooh, find a question that you're interested in. So for me, it was like air purifiers or the tea, water in the tea, stuff like that. Differences in China. Find a question that you're interested in, and then just start doing it citizen science style.
Nice, very cool. What's the most fun thing about being a college professor?
Ooh, I would say it's the flexibility. The joke that people always give is, being a professor is great. You can work any 60 hours of the week you want.
Yeah. And then what's the worst part about being a college professor?
Ooh, I really hate grades. So we have to grade our students on a curve. So we have to have students that
Even in psychology and really?
Yep.
Is that doesn't seem to make sense.
It's in our, it's our school does it that way.
Okay.
So, we have to have some students that just fall on the C's and the D's. So that's always, I hate doing that.
Frustrating. Very cool.
Yeah.
And then if you could give one piece of advice for people about your own tea journey, about how to continue on their tea journey, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say, if you can ever go and sit in something like this and try different teas, that's been one of the most fun things for me, is like going to Tea City, and there are places like that in the US where you can do this. Try different types of a Dragonwell, right? Obviously there's all the different, there's the pu'er and the green, but like try, 5 types of the green, and that sort of experience will really teach you a lot. You can learn a lot in an afternoon, and your enjoyment will just increase from there.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if you want, I don't know if you're a big social media guy, you want to give people how to follow you on the internet?
A little bit. Probably the easiest place to find me is on Twitter. So I'm at Thomas Talhelm, so my name.
Great.
And if you Google me, you'd probably find your way there.
Great, awesome. And then thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. It's really fun. I haven't gotten a chance to catch up with you in person in a while. We did some calls over COVID, but it's good to actually finally be back in the same room. And for those of you who have been watching, thanks again for watching. You're the real ones if you kept all the way to the end of the podcast. If you want any of the teas that we drank today, or any of the tea equipment, or any of the tea pets that are on the table, our Brewista iridescent unicorn kettles, all this stuff is on the website. Aren't they nice?
Yeah, it's great.
You were talking about white labeling. It's like I could just slap my logo on a kettle, but I'm not going to do that because it takes real engineering to make a good kettle. And so the Brewista's products are really good. I use them all the time. I've never had a single one of them break. It's really good stuff. All that stuff is on the website, and as we kind of talked about it earlier, it's like, the reason that we get to do this is because we hope a portion of you who are trying to get into tea will go to the website, try the tea, try the stuff, try the subscription. We have our new subscription teas that are out right now. That's the easiest way to get a good amount of tea at a really good price. 3 different flavors every cycle. You can get the individual box or subscribe. Or we have our 8 tea samplers that are back in stock. So to your idea of trying the multiple types of tea, that's why we make 8 teas in the sampler, so that you can try out all the different flavors. And it's just been really great to hang out with you. And best of luck on all your future cultural research. And we should do some sort of comedy show where like we take some sort of cultural insight from your thing and I jokeify it somehow.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling like it really did feel like they were coming from the same place. So
yeah,
very cool. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm Jesse.
I'm Thomas.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.